The story of the adventurer begins with a fisherman named John. As always, John prepared his small boat to go out to sea and fish. This was how he made a living, selling fish at the market for a good profit. He was also planning to ask his girlfriend for her hand in marriage soon, completely unaware of what fate had in store for him. John sailed, casting his nets along the way. His method was simple: keep the boat moving while the fish got trapped in the nets. It had always worked for him, but this time, he was so focused on fishing that he did not check the direction. Unbeknownst to him, he ended up veering into an area where the waves pulled him into forbidden waters. Slowly, he noticed a dense fog around him, different from anything he had ever seen. Before he could figure out where he had gone, he became completely blind, unable to see where he was going. This was the beginning of a dangerous region, often compared to the Bermuda Triangle. Mysterious and inexplicable, John desperately searched for an exit, but all he saw was mist and endless water. With no other option, he continued floating with the waves, hoping the fog would dissipate. Suddenly, he spotted a large ship ahead, but it seemed abandoned. There were no people or crew on board. The ship was luxurious, possibly belonging to a wealthy businessman. Thinking he might find help, John navigated his small boat alongside and boarded. He carefully inspected the deck. Being a fisherman, he knew a lot about the sea, but this experience was different from anything he had faced. He shouted, but no one responded. Descending to the interior, he found several cabins where the crew members usually stayed. To his surprise, the rooms were filled with food and fresh supplies, as if someone had been there recently. This left John curious. Where had the people gone? Had they been caught in a storm or attacked by some mortal entity? His parents had told stories about mysterious sea creatures, and now those tales seemed chillingly real. Believing that the missing crew might still need help, John headed to the control room. Everything was broken. The engine was flooded with water and completely useless. He tried using the radio, sending a distress signal to request a rescue team. The uncertainty of whether anyone would receive it was frightening. Realizing that the boat was empty, John decided to go back to his own boat. But when he went back up, he was shocked. His boat had drifted away a distance. The fog began to dissipate, revealing only endless water. There was no land, no islands, just the luxurious yacht broken in the middle of nowhere. His small boat had disappeared, and it wasn't moving either. Trapped and unaware of his coordinates, John realized he had no choice. If he wanted to survive, he needed to fix the yacht and try to move forward. John had some knowledge about boats and knew that even without an engine, a vessel could move by adjusting its large sails to catch the wind. He spent hours trying to fix the engine and adjust the sails. After much effort, he finally managed to arrange them so that the boat could move in the direction of the wind. For the first time, he felt a little relief as the yacht began to float slowly. However, countless questions haunted him. Whose boat was that? And why had the crew abandoned it in the middle of the ocean, despite leaving so many resources behind? John was about to find out personally as he remained trapped inside. Hours passed, but no rescue team arrived, despite his repeated attempts to send emergency signals over the radio. Growing anxious, John climbed to the deck, looking around in frustration, and at some point felt a sudden urge to relieve himself. But while he was distracted, the waves became more intense, destabilizing the boat. Suddenly, a violent jolt knocked John down, almost throwing him into the cold water. Fortunately, he clung tightly to the sides. Falling into the water would mean certain death, with deadly sharks and other monstrous creatures waiting below. Struggling with all his strength, John pulled himself back onto the deck. However, for a brief moment he felt as if someone pushed him, rather than the boat simply losing balance. Fear consumed him. He retreated to the lower deck where strange sounds echoed. Although no one responded to his calls, trying to calm himself, John went to the bathroom, but even there his mind was filled with dark thoughts. What if no rescue arrived? What if supplies slowly ran out until nothing was left? As soon as he finished, he reached for the door, only to discover it was locked from the outside. Panic took over him. If he was alone on the boat, who had locked him in? He knocked on the door, shouting that he wasn't there to steal anything, just to help, but there was no response. Trapped and terrified, John tried everything to free himself, but the door would not budge. His situation worsened, and a dread settled in. Someone or something wanted to torture him until he broke mentally. until he deteriorated without ever using the resources of the boat. Desperate, he searched the small room and found a closet. As he opened it, he was horrified to see bloodstains inside. Whose blood was this, and how had it gotten there? He had no idea. But in his critical state, the discovery was terrifying. He began to suffocate, his breathing becoming heavy, and his face showing clear signs of tension. Meanwhile, John was growing increasingly distressed. Suddenly, while looking outside, he saw a massive cargo ship passing in the distance. His only hope was to somehow catch the crew's attention so they could rescue him. But his small boat was nothing compared to the enormous ship, and his voice was too weak to reach the workers above the roar of the ocean. Then John realized something terrifying. His boat was floating directly into the path of the cargo ship. If they continued, his small vessel would be crushed, killing him instantly. To save himself, John decided to prevent his boat from moving forward. He quickly grabbed a rope, intending to use it as an anchor by throwing it into the water so he could latch onto something. The plan seemed smart, but it failed miserably. The rope got tangled in the small propeller, pulling with tremendous force until it wrapped around his neck. The spinning blades tightened the noose, choking him as his face turned red. He struggled desperately, scratching at the rope, and with sheer force, he managed to break free, throwing it aside. Although he had nearly died, the rope slightly slowed the speed of his boat. However, the massive presence of the cargo ship rocked the waters, and the violent impact caused his boat to partially capsize. Water rushed in through the cracks, causing more damage. John was exhausted and terrified, but at least the cargo ship passed without crushing him. His life was spared, but the only hope of rescue was now receding into the distance. Again trapped in the bathroom of the yacht, John tried to steer the boat with long poles while he quenched his thirst with a little water. Hours had passed since he was locked up. When he looked outside again, he noticed that the color of the ocean had changed. He knew that in open water, the water sometimes changed color in different regions, but this seemed ominous, as if he had floated into something strange. His patience finally snapped. He shouted and banged on the locked door, convinced that whoever was aboard was toying with him, torturing him on purpose. But no one responded. Hours passed, and he remained trapped, the boat taking on more and more water due to the damage. Soon the floor was completely submerged, the water rising past his legs. If it continued like this, the vessel would completely sink. And then it got worse. A massive storm approached. Darkness covered the horizon. The waves rose abnormally, and the entire ocean around him turned into a violent, living nightmare. The waves were so large they could have sunk even the biggest ships. Fortunately, John's boat was not directly in the center of the storm. However, the violent jolts made him realize how fragile his vessel was. The fissures widened, and the steering system he had improvised earlier was completely out of use. At this point, the storm was in control. The water kept rising until it almost reached his mouth, forcing him to fight for every breath. If he couldn't get out soon, he would surely drown. Then, suddenly, the bathroom door began to open, and with a desperate pull, John burst it open. Finally, he came out of the bathroom, only to find the entire cabin flooded. He had less than an hour before the boat sank completely. Breathless, he ran to the upper deck to take a deep breath. The storm had finally passed, but the endless ocean stretched out in all directions, leaving him completely lost. The panorama crushed his morale, but he refused to give up. Determined, he went downstairs to inspect the damage. To his horror, much of the exterior of the boat was cracked and broken. Repairing the fissures from inside was impossible. He would have to do it from outside in open water. The radio was dead, and it seemed he had drifted into a zone with no signal at all. Now he faced a choice: surrender to death or fight with everything he had left to fix the vessel. He thought of his future, the family he still wanted to build, and resolved to survive. First, he gathered all the useful supplies from the sinking yacht. Among them were several oxygen tanks, an unexpected blessing. If the boat eventually sank, he could still breathe underwater for a time and keep swimming forward. Using these supplies, he assembled an improvised raft that floated well thanks to the tanks. With it, John entered the water, going around the yacht and covering the outer fissures one by one. Although he moved carefully, sharks circled nearby, making every second a gamble with death. For hours, he worked tirelessly, sealing cracks and then removing water from inside. Slowly, the sinking boat began to stabilize. Now he only had to fix the engine. At that moment, John's true spirit emerged. Unshakable, determined, refusing to be defeated by the sea. He had survival skills, courage, and an indomitable will, and would use all of them. Because in this cursed part of the sea, no one would come to save him. John managed to repair most of his damaged boat, sealing the fissures and draining the water, but the engine refused to start. He tried every trick he knew, every piece of knowledge he could summon. However, the machine remained inert. Day after day, he sent radio signals, desperately calling for help, praying that at least one transmission could reach a rescue team. But the ocean remained silent, swallowing his cries. His hope dwindled with each passing day. Although the hole had been repaired and the water had disappeared, the inactivity of the engine made the boat seem like a hallucinatory wreck adrift. Sitting on the deck, John studied his map, trying to guess where the currents were dragging him. But the endless horizon revealed nothing, just water stretching into the infinite. With supplies nearly exhausted, his body weakened and his mind filled with torment. He realized that his survival now depended entirely on luck. Then, through the veil of despair, he spotted something on the horizon. A massive cargo ship transporting goods across the sea. His heart raced with desperate hope. He plunged into the cold water, climbed onto the makeshift raft he had built earlier, and began to paddle toward the distant ship. Every movement was agony, but his determination burned stronger than his exhaustion. He needed to reach that ship. Then, to his horror, he heard a rumble behind him. The very boat he had repaired roared to life. Suddenly, it began to move on its own. Slowly but surely, it started to move forward, directly toward him. John looked back, incredulous and terrified. It seemed as if his boat was chasing him, about to crush him. How the engine had restarted was a mystery, but if they collided, he would be finished. John paddled with all his strength, but his flimsy raft was no match for the approaching vessel. In a final moment of desperation, he dove into the cold water. The larger boat collided with his raft, shattering it and scattering the debris through the waves. His chance to reach the cargo ship vanished instantly. Now surrounded by icy water and circling sharks, John's situation became critical. Trembling violently, with his lungs on fire, he had no choice but to fight to return to the only thing left to him, his cursed and unpredictable boat. Dragging himself from the water, half dead from the cold, he stumbled back aboard, but what he saw sent chills through his veins. The engine compartment was completely out of control. The boat was moving slowly forward on its own, driven by some technical failure that John could not comprehend. He collapsed inside, all muscles screaming in pain, his body weak and trembling from exhaustion. The moment he fell to the cabin floor, sleep overtook him, and he slipped into unconsciousness, unaware of how many hours had passed. When he finally awoke, morning had broken. The storm outside had calmed, and the boat floated steadily in the tranquil sea. For the first time in days, there was silence. John got up, determined to get out. But a new nightmare awaited him. New cracks had formed in the hull. Water was gushing in again, and the debris was piling against the cabin door. The door refused to move. No matter how hard John tried to push it, it wouldn't budge an inch. His heart sank as the horrifying realization hit him. He was trapped in the cabin again. The same nightmare was repeating itself, and this time he had no idea whether it was pure coincidence or if something or someone was deliberately orchestrating it. The thought chilled him to the bone, and panic began to scratch at his chest. John banged his hands against the steel door, shouting, hoping that desperation would set him free. But the door was strong, reinforced to withstand pressures that an ordinary human could not overcome. The more he tried, the more useless it seemed. His breathing became shallow, suffocation threatening to take his life. Desperate, his eyes scanned the cabin until they rested on a small opening near the ceiling, covered by a mirror. A possible escape. He climbed up, gripped the edges, and pushed the glass with all his strength. But nothing happened. He pounded on the mirror repeatedly, feeling the pain return with every blow. The attempts to climb and break it made him slip, accumulating bruises and cuts. The need to survive fueled his persistence. Blood stained his fingers. His mind screamed that it could be the end, suffocating and dying alone in a steel coffin. Then, something distracted him. Through another angled mirror, he spotted something he hadn't seen in days. Land. Soil. Rocks. An island. After nearly 48 hours lost in a vast expanse of water, hope blossomed in his despair. Twisting through the opening, John threw himself into the open air, his lungs eagerly filling with salty wind. Finally, something beyond the water. He moored his damaged boat to the shore and jumped onto the island. But even upon touching solid ground, a sinister thought nagged at him. This did not seem like a happy accident. The boat moving on its own, the engine starting by itself, being forced to this exact location, everything pointed to something invisible, something intelligent. Some entity was manipulating him, guiding him like a piece on a board. Grabbing a rusty iron rod he had found on the boat, John carefully circled the island, inspecting the surroundings, seeking whoever or whatever was behind this distorted game. Hours passed. He explored every corner he could, but found nothing. There was not a soul, not even signs of animal life. The island was dead. Exhausted and restless, John returned to the place where he had moored. That was when his blood ran cold. His eyes widened in disbelief at the sight of the boat moving, floating away from the shore, its motor silent, but its body gliding steadily, as if pulled by invisible hands. John's breath quickened. The invisible force had trapped him once, nearly drowned him, and now it was abandoning him, sailing back into the vast ocean, perhaps to trap another victim. The horrifying realization hit him. This was not just random misfortune. He was trapped in the grip of an invisible predator playing with human lives. He stepped back from the shore, horrified. Returning to that cursed boat was no longer an option. But he couldn't stay there either, trapped on an abandoned island without food, without water, and the possibility that this invisible entity was still lurking nearby. Driven by the instinct to survive, John ran inland and climbed the highest hill he could find, hoping to gain a vantage point. From there, perhaps, just perhaps, he could discover some clue, some way to fight back, or at least a chance to signal for help before it was too late. From the top of the hill, John's eyes widened in disbelief. Not far away, through the shimmering expanse of the ocean, he spotted another island. At first, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him, but the image did not waver. Desperate for answers, he gathered all the strength he had left and set off determined to reach it. When he finally set foot on the beach, his heart nearly stopped. The place was very familiar. It was the same island where his journey had begun. People were there, fishermen casting their nets, families enjoying motorboats, laughter echoing in the air as if nothing had gone wrong. John froze. None of this made sense. Just a few hours ago, he was lost in the middle of the endless ocean, fighting for every breath, being hunted by something he could not see. How could he be back here, right at the starting point, surrounded by ordinary people living their lives? It felt like he had awoken from a nightmare that had come back around. The boat moving on its own, the storm, the suffocating cabin, the invisible force guiding him to that deserted island. Was it real, or just a distorted hallucination? If it was real, then why had the boat dragged him back here, and why him of all people? The question spun incessantly, but no answer appeared. One thing, however, was undeniable. Every bruise, every cut, every scar on his body remained. His flesh bore the proof of everything he had endured. The trial was not imagined. It had happened. But how could he explain this to anyone? Who would believe that a ghostly presence had toyed with him? That a cursed boat had dragged him across the ocean only to deposit him back at the starting point? John remained silent, surrounded by people who had no idea of the horrors he had witnessed. Internally, he carried the weight of a story that could never truly be told. The mystery remained unsolved, the invisible entity, the unknown purpose. And so his journey ended, not with a resolution, but with confusion. A riddle that would haunt him long after he returned to touch the familiar sand.